It is not uncommon for jewelry to be passed down when one's parents sadly pass away. It is a very heavy experience when somebody loses a parent, especially when it happens at a way too early age. Parents often don't have everything in place or documented at an early age, and the inheritance needs to be taken care of by the children. And it is not uncommon for them to stumble across things they never knew their parents had. This is exactly what happened to Lydia when her mother sadly passed away. But this specific find would reveal a lot about her mother's past, information that would shock Lydia when it was revealed to her: the ring. Everybody has that one particular item in their possession that has a special story. For Sarah, this was the ring she always wore. For most people, this immediately rang a bell and made them think it must be a wedding ring. But this could not be further from the truth. A big secret Sarah was not, nor had she ever been, married. And this was common knowledge among her friends and family. They had asked her before how she got the ring, but Sarah had always been afraid to tell anybody the truth about the ring's origin and value. Not even her daughter Lydia knew about it. Meet Lydia. Lydia is now happily married to John. They live a somewhat regular life, but they do struggle a bit financially. They can make ends meet, but the pair has to work relatively hard. And for Lydia, this has not been the only big struggle she has had to deal with in her life. Lydia only had her mother growing up. Lydia has had a difficult life. She was an only child and had a very good relationship with her mother Sarah because they always had to do everything together. Her father had never really been in the picture, and this had a pretty big effect on Lydia when she was young. Never met her father, Lydia had never even met her biological father. He had left her mother Sarah when he found out she had gotten pregnant. He and Sarah were a couple at the time, but unwed, so it was easy to walk away from the family without consequences. Lydia had never forgiven him for this. They both worked hard. Lydia's whole childhood felt like a battle she fought alongside her mother. While she was in school, her mother worked 2 jobs in order to provide for them, and when Lydia was old enough, she managed to get a job as well to fill up her free hours in the week. An incredible bond. It might have been a struggle every day, but the pair seemed to make it work. For a long time, it felt like all they had in the world was each other, and this created an incredibly strong bond between them. Sarah didn't feel the need to look for a new husband or boyfriend. Not that she even had the time. Lydia met John. Lydia, however, did find the time for a little bit of romance in her life. She met her boyfriend John on the job, and they started to really connect with each other quickly. They were only together for a couple of months, but already had big plans. But a big test for their relationship was just around the corner. Saving up to move out, Lydia and Sarah were both saving up as much money as they could. This was all to give Lydia a chance to move out of the house when she was ready. Sarah wanted nothing more than to give her only child the best life possible. But then the unthinkable happened. Sarah got very sick. Sarah suddenly got very sick when Lydia was around 24 years old. Doctors found it difficult to determine what exactly was wrong with her, and Sarah's condition quickly went downhill. Their lives were crashing down around them. All of the savings Lydia and Sarah had gone to Lydia's treatment. But sadly, it didn't seem to matter. Not going to make it. After only a few weeks, it was clear that Sarah was not going to make it through. Because the doctors had been unable to determine what she was suffering from, all they could do was treat the symptoms and make Sarah more comfortable. Lydia had to say goodbye to her mother and best friend. Sarah passed when Lydia was 25. It was extremely hard for Lydia to get through this period. She had to take care of a lot of things, being the only child and the only family that really seemed to care. Sarah had not been in close contact with other family members, as she felt they never tried to help when she was struggling. John was a big help. With so much weight on Lydia's shoulders, it was a miracle that she did not crack under the pressure. The main reason she managed to make it through was with a lot of help from her boyfriend, John. He had been there every step of the way, and it made them even closer than before. Lydia organized the funeral. After her mother had passed away, a lot of things had to be taken care of. The funeral was the first thing that had to be organized. It was a sober goodbye with only a small gathering. It was an open casket, and the moment Sarah's sister saw her, she made a comment that would turn a lot of heads. Sarah's ring was missing. Sarah's sister noticed that she was not wearing the ring she always had on. Lydia had not even thought about this in all the craziness. But now, it was too late to even go looking for it. In the grand scheme of things, It just didn't seem that important. Lydia had no idea how wrong she would be about this. It was a worthy goodbye. Even though it was a sober ordeal, Lydia did manage to say goodbye to her mother in a satisfying way. She was still distraught by the whole situation, but she was starting to make peace with it a little bit. She was, however, not prepared for everything that was about to happen next. The inheritance. After the funeral, the next major thing that had to be taken care of was the inheritance. Sarah was not rich in the slightest bit, and before her passing, she had documented that everything she owned would be left to Lydia. And there was one thing Lydia did really want to find. Lydia wanted to find the ring. The comment made at the funeral about her mother's ring had stuck with her. Ever since then, Lydia knew she had to find it, as it was probably the item that had the most sentimental value to her. Sarah had worn it nearly every day. But finding it was turning out to be more of a burden than a blessing. Lydia's mother had no money at all. Sarah didn't own a house, she just rented it. And she barely had any money saved. Even less than Lydia had expected. All of Sarah's money had either already gone into Lydia's pocket in order to help her move out, or to all the treatment she needed in her final weeks. Finding her mother's old ring, many of the items still left in the house, like furniture and clothing, went to thrift stores. Lydia had no need for most of it. Lydia did find a couple of items she wanted to keep that had some sentimental value. She desperately kept looking for the ring. Finally, she found it. The ring had a story. Lydia knew that this ring had a story. Her mother had always told her that she had stolen it when she was just a little girl. Apparently, when Sarah was only 12, she had a job cleaning houses for people. This made her a little bit of money that was needed to keep her household going. Abusing Sarah, she used to hit Sarah every time she would do something that was not to her satisfaction. This went on for a couple of months, as Sarah could not leave at the time. She had no other houses to work at, and she really needed the money. But this treatment started taking its toll on little Sarah. Stealing a ring. But during all this, Sarah was constantly looking for other work or other places to clean. And when Sarah finally had another house to work in, she quickly quit the job, but not before stealing a ring she had found on her last day. It was her way of taking a little bit of revenge. Was it true? Lydia had always taken this story as the truth and loved it when she was younger. It had made her see her mother as a badass and someone who was not afraid. It was an example she had always wanted to follow. But Lydia would eventually find out that this was not the whole story. Lydia will wear the ring from now on. Sarah has always worn the ring proudly as a reminder of when she stood up for herself, and now Lydia would be wearing it as a reminder of her mother. Almost all other things she kept from Sarah either disappeared in drawers in the shed or were sold after a while. A strange story. Even though Lydia loved the story of the ring, it had always seemed a bit strange and even far-fetched to Lydia, especially the more she started thinking about it. She never saw her mother as the type to do something against the rules or steal anything. Something wasn't adding up. Lydia and her boyfriend got closer. Lydia had to move on with her life. Luckily, she still had John. While they probably had the peak months of their relationship in the worst possible time, they did end up staying together and only grew closer through everything that Lydia had to go through. Closer in more ways than one. They had their first child. Not even a year after Sarah had passed, the couple had their first child, Sammy. Lydia quickly found out that having a child was the best way to fill the void her mother left in a healthy way. The things she attempted before she got pregnant were a lot less healthy. Lydia turned to alcohol. Lydia had turned to alcohol in the first months after her mother's passing. It was starting to become a big problem really fast because to her, it started to feel like the only escape from her thoughts at the time. John got really worried about the situation for a while, giving up the bottle. But the pregnancy turned out to be a blessing in more ways than one. Lydia gave up the bottle immediately when she found out the news because she wanted to take no risks with the baby on the way. But she had to find a new release in the meantime. It was difficult to give it up. Lydia had gotten used to turning to alcohol every time a wave of sadness came over her. At this point, even if the sadness was not related to her mother's passing, being unable to do so, plus her becoming more and more hormonal during the pregnancy, made her an absolute wreck for months on end. Things started to look up. They were some of the toughest months of Lydia's life, which again had not been easy up to this point anyway. But with the birth of their child, things finally started to look up for the couple. Lydia was able to focus all her attention on raising Sammy, and the need for a drink got less and less because of it. Lydia started workout out as a replacement for alcohol. Lydia started to work out more and more. It was something she really enjoyed doing, and she thought that it would only have benefits for her, which it did at first. Lydia was able to see the benefits of getting healthier. But eventually, working out would have an unexpected consequence for Lydia. The family was doing well. Over the next couple of years, the life of the family was relatively good. Sammy was growing up in good health. Lydia and John had finally saved up enough money to get married and were still extremely happy together. But just like the rest of Lydia's life, a big speed bump was about to appear on her path. Leaving home after so many years, Sammy was grown up and ready to leave the house. It was a moment that Lydia was dreading very much. This because caring for Sammy had been her main purpose in life for years on end now, and she was afraid of what this major change in lifestyle would bring. Lydia went running that day. To clear her mind, Lydia decided to go a jog that afternoon. She did this often and was in relatively good shape for her age. Thinking back on her alcohol-filled days, she was very proud of how she was living now. But with her head firmly in the clouds, she wasn't paying enough attention to the path. She tripped and fell. Lydia tripped on a branch that had fallen out of a tree and was laying on the path now. Lydia had to think in a split second and luckily managed to stick her hand in front of her to cushion her fall. But when Lydia tried to get up, she noticed something that sent a wave of despair through her body. Her mother's ring broke her mother's ring. It had broken. The ring was still around her finger, where it had been for the last 25 years now, but it had cracked and was now no longer a fully connected piece. Lydia felt tears well up in her eyes and decided to get back home immediately. John told her to go to a jeweler. She was hoping that John would be able to fix it, as he did with almost anything that had broken down in their house. But John wasn't willing to take the risk with something that was so near and dear to Lydia's heart. He advised her to take it to a jeweler to get it repaired. They can fix it. Lydia went that same afternoon. It was only a short drive into town, and she had called ahead to the jewelry store and was assured by them that they could easily fix the broken ring at a relatively cheap price. But Lydia was not prepared for what the jeweler had to tell her upon inspecting the ring. The only jeweler in town, Lydia and John lived in a small town. It was the same town Lydia and her mother had lived all their lives and where she had met John. The place only had one jeweler who had been operational for all of Lydia's life and even longer. But Lydia had never actually been in this store, and suddenly she realized why Lydia was never allowed in. Lydia remembered that when she was younger, her mother had always forbidden her from going into the jewelry shop. Lydia had never known why as a kid, but she hadn't questioned it. As an adult, she'd never had a reason to go to the store anyway because of her financial situation. He had seen this ring before Lydia was the only customer in the store when she entered, and the jeweler greeted her with a smile on his face. She explained what had happened and gave the employee the ring. He raised an eyebrow when he saw it and proclaimed that he had seen such a ring before, but could not place it. Lydia told him the story. Lydia told him how she had gotten it and also how her mother had supposedly got it. But when she mentioned at what age her mother had stolen the ring from her employer, the jeweler stopped her and said that it was impossible for that story to be correct. Lydia's jaw dropped when he explained why. It can't be true. If the story was correct, it would mean that her mother had stolen the ring in 1952. But the techniques that were used to make this ring were only applied past 1968. This was the earliest that this ring could have been produced. Lydia was stunned by what she was being told. He took out an old catalog. He quickly went in the back and took out a small old book. It was a catalog of items they had in the store, but this was a catalog from the year 1968. He looked through a couple of pages and turned the book to Lydia. She could not believe what she was seeing on its pages. It's her mother's ring. It was her mother's ring. But how? The jeweler proclaimed that this was how he knew the ring. This model had been produced by their store, but far before his time. And when he was in the back, he also did some digging through the store's archives and made a bizarre discovery. The ring had been stolen here 50 years ago. This exact ring had been stolen from their store in 1969. He knew that it was this exact ring because the serial number matched up. Lydia could not believe what she was hearing. Her mother had stolen the ring from this store? But why? And then the realization came to her. Her mother had to have done it. 1969 was the year when she was born. Her father had left her mother, and she had already been strapped for cash when he was in the picture. She must have started stealing out of desperation. Sarah must have done it for Lydia. But the store clerk had one more thing to say. It was the first positive message of the conversation. The jeweler allows her to keep the ring. He would allow Lydia to keep the ring. The crime happened so long ago that the police wouldn't do anything about it if he tried. But even if they would, he had no intention of taking the ring away from her. He realized the sentimental value that it has to Lydia is way greater than any monetary value it would have to him. So much Lydia doesn't know, and luckily for Lydia, the jeweler was able to make that call because it was now his store. He even offered to repair the ring and restore it to its original quality for free. Lydia could not be happier, but she was still left with the question of what else her mother had stolen and what other secrets she was unaware of. She knows her mother loved her. She had to make peace with the fact that there would always be a lot about her mother that she would never know. But what she did know, and actually had always known, is that there was nothing that her mother would not do for her. And knowing that made this ring even more special to her.